Stop for one moment. Think about Christmas. 1869. Think about a night so full of snow you heard your own breath louder than the street outside. The great snow swallowed every sound. Yet one thing stayed bright. Candles. Candles placed in windows by people who feared the dark would press in too close. You feel it, don't you? That pull toward warmth when your hands shake from cold. Bread cooling on a table while the storm grows sharp outside. A small town waiting for someone to reach their door before the drifts rise higher. Christmas 1869 holds a secret you sense already. A small truth tied to your own longing for safety in winter nights. Stay, the story waits for you. This story follows a widow named Eleanor who lived near a narrow lane not far from the parish bakery. She lost much before the winters settled in, though she kept her strength through quiet tasks. The great snow pressed against her door for days. Supplies thinned. Her daughter grew weak with fever. Eleanor walked each morning through frozen paths to search for bread and coal. Neighbors helped each other with small offerings when the storm refused to ease. This winter shaped the town in slow, steady ways. Nothing rushed. Every sound grew soft under thick snow. Every moment held weight. Eleanor learned how to hold hope while the wind scraped across her windows. Before we begin, tell me where you watch from tonight and what hour touches your room. Settle your shoulders. Pull a blanket close. Let your breath slow. Let your body feel safe. I'm glad you joined me. If you enjoy quiet winter nights like this, press like, leave a small note in the comments, and subscribe so these stories reach you again. Sit back and rest now. Snow pressed against Eleanor's door before dawn. The wind pushed loose flakes under the frame. She rose from her narrow bed with slow movements, careful not to disturb her daughter. The small room held thin warmth from a single ember in the hearth. Eleanor placed 2 pieces of wood near it, hoping for a stronger flame. She watched smoke rise in a thin line. The ember grew brighter. A small glow filled the room. She knelt beside her daughter. The girl's cheeks looked pale. Her breath rasped. Eleanor touched her forehead. Heat stayed under the skin. Supplies grew low in the cottage. A single candle waited on the table. A half loaf of bread rested beside it, nearly hard from the cold. Eleanor wrapped a scarf around her head and shoulders. She placed 2 blankets over her daughter. Then she stepped into boots which still held traces of yesterday's walk through deep snow. She looked toward the window. Frost coated the glass, hiding the lane outside. She whispered to her daughter, "I return soon." She kissed her forehead, then stepped toward the door. The wooden latch felt cold against her fingers. She pushed it open. A wave of cold swept across her face. The lane outside looked buried under fresh drifts. She stepped out. The snow reached her knees. Each step pressed deep. The air held no sound. Smoke from chimneys barely rose in the stillness. No voices echoed through the lane. A soft glow from a nearby window proved someone woke early, though no figure appeared. Eleanor moved toward the bakery near the square. Light from a small lantern flickered inside its window. The baker rose before dawn each day. He worked through the cold with steady hands. She needed fresh bread for her daughter. She also needed warm broth from the parish kitchen later in the morning. A man with a cart tried to push through the snow at the far end of the lane. Eleanor lifted a hand. He nodded with a tired expression. The wheels stuck in a drift. He leaned into the handles. breath rising in a thick cloud. Several cottages around him looked shuttered tight. She passed him and turned toward a narrow alley which led to the square. Snow there reached higher. She lifted her skirt to avoid dragging its edge. Her boots sank deep with each step. She paused once to rest her arms against a stone wall. The cold pressed hard on her skin. When she reached a square, she saw 2 lanterns lit on poles near the center. A sign fastened to one pole read, "Great snow, keep paths clear. Aid neighbors." The ink looked fresh. Someone placed it there during the night. The bakery stood across the square. Light leaked from its shutters. A thin line of smoke rose from its chimney. Eleanor walked faster. The scent of warm bread reached her as she stepped closer. It mixed with the cold in a strange way, softening the air near the doorway. She pushed the door open. Warmth struck her cheeks. The baker stood behind the counter with sleeves rolled to his elbows. His hair looked dusted with flour. He placed small loaves on a board. He turned when he heard the door. "Eleanor," he said with a surprised tone. "You stepped out early." "My daughter needs food," Eleanor said. "Her fever holds through the night." He nodded. "Take a fresh loaf." He placed one wrapped in cloth on the counter. "Take broth from the back room. It warms slow on the stove." Eleanor placed a coin on the counter. The baker shook his head. "Keep it. You need strength more." She hesitated. "I pay next week." He nodded once, accepting her promise. She stepped into the back room. A pot of broth steamed on a small iron stove. She filled a tin cup with careful hands. The scent filled her lungs. She thought of her daughter, weak under blankets. When she left the bakery, the snow outside looked deeper. Flakes fell with renewed force. She wrapped the cloth tighter around the warm loaf and placed the tin cup in her coat pocket. She pressed her scarf over her mouth as the wind picked up. She walked across the square. The lanterns flickered under bursts of wind. A horse stood near a hitching post, head lowered. Its breath rose in clouds. The rider stood nearby, struggling to fix a loose strap on his saddle. He nodded toward Eleanor. "Storm grows stronger," he said. "It does," she replied. He pulled his coat close and returned to his work. Eleanor continued toward the alley. When she reached the lane, she saw the man with the cart again. The wheels still stuck. Snow gathered around them. Eleanor approached him. "Need help?" she asked. He looked up with tired eyes. "I pushed toward the parish. Supplies inside must reach them." Eleanor stepped behind the cart. "Let me lift from the side." He nodded. Together they pressed hard. The wheels lifted an inch, then another. The cart moved forward a small distance. Eleanor's boots slipped, but she steadied herself. One final push freed the wheel from the drift. The man released a long breath. "Thank you," he said. "Children wait for these sacks." Eleanor nodded. "Walk slow. Ice forms under new snow today." "I know," he said. "I step careful." He pushed the cart forward and continued down the lane. Eleanor watched him disappear around a corner before she resumed her path. When she reached her cottage, she knocked snow off her boots and stepped inside. The air felt warmer thanks to the small fire. Her daughter opened her eyes slightly. "You returned," the girl whispered. "I told you I would," Eleanor said. She placed the bread on the table, poured broth into a small bowl, and carried it to the bed. The girl sipped it with weak hands. Eleanor supported her head. "Does the snow still fall?" the girl asked. It falls heavy, Eleanor said. But the bakery stayed warm. People work through it. The girl finished the broth and sank back into the blankets. Eleanor placed her hand on the girl's hair and smoothed it gently. I step out again at midday, Eleanor said. Parish kitchen warms more broth. We need coal too. The girl nodded slightly. I sleep again, rest, Eleanor whispered. Hours passed in slow quiet. Eleanor tended the fire, kept her daughter warm, and sorted the few items left in the house. Snow pressed harder against the windows as morning moved toward noon. The wind grew stronger. She heard it scrape across the door in long, low breaths. At midday, she stepped outside again. The lane looked harsher now. Snow reached her waist in some places. She walked in narrow tracks left by her earlier journey. The cold cut through her coat. She pressed her scarf over her mouth and nose. Two women moved near the far cottage, clearing a path with wooden shovels. They lifted heavy piles of snow and tossed them aside. Their arms trembled with effort. Eleanor offered help. They accepted with grateful nods. Together they widened the narrow path enough for people to pass. One woman spoke through short breaths. The great snow pushes against every door. Eleanor nodded. We work through it, she said. They finished a path and parted ways. Eleanor moved toward the parish kitchen. Inside, several women stirred large pots of broth and sorted small parcels of food. Candlelight filled the room. A priest handed blankets to a group of children near the wall. Eleanor received a small package of coal and another cup of broth. She thanked them and left. The wind grew sharper when she stepped into the lane. The snow rose high enough to hide the tops of some fence posts. She made her way home with slow steps, leaning into each drift. When she reached the cottage, she saw her daughter sitting up. A faint smile crossed the girl's face. You've returned again, the girl whispered. I always return, Eleanor said. She placed the coal near the hearth and the broth beside the bed. She checked the girl's temperature. The fever still held, but her breathing grew steadier. Eleanor fed her small spoonfuls of broth. The girl swallowed slowly. Outside, the storm pressed harder. The roof creaked from weight. Snow piled high against the doorframe. Eleanor placed more wood on the fire. Warmth spread across the room. Shadows danced on the walls. The girl closed her eyes and drifted into sleep. Eleanor sat in a chair near the window and listened to the storm. The great snow moved with relentless force. It buried the lane. It blocked doors. It swallowed sound. Yet people endured it with quiet strength. She thought of the man with the cart pushing supplies toward the parish. She thought of the baker who worked before dawn. She thought of the women clearing the path together. She thought of her daughter's soft breath growing stronger. Night approached. Early Eleanor lit the single candle left on the table. Its glow reached the far wall. She watched it flicker. She listened to the wind. She felt the weight of winter press close. She whispered into the quiet room, we endured this night. Outside, snow continued to fall. Eleanor woke before dawn with a start. A sharp crack echoed across the lane. She sat upright in her chair, blankets slipping from her lap. The fire burned low. The candle flickered near its base. The cottage felt colder than the night before. She rose fast and stepped toward the window. Frost coated the glass in thick layers. She brushed it with her sleeve. Outside, a drift shifted under its own weight and slid down the side of the lane. More snow pressed inward from the road. Her daughter stirred in bed. Mother. The the girl whispered. Eleanor turned at once. "I stand here," she said. "Rest." The girl nodded weakly and lay back against the pillow. Eleanor placed more wood on the fire and warmed her hands near the rising flame. She listened for another crack. Only the wind replied. A long, dragging sound passed through the street as snow slid off a roof nearby. She stepped toward the door and pressed her ear against it. A deep silence waited outside. The snow reached higher during the night. She pushed lightly on the door. It moved an inch. She pushed again with more strength. The door opened slowly through heavy weight. Cold air rushed in. She stepped outside for a moment. The sky hung low with dark clouds. Snow reached nearly to her waist in many places. Paths formed the day before now disappeared. She turned back toward the cottage and closed the door to hold in warmth. Her daughter watched her from the bed. "Does the snow fall again?" "Yes," Eleanor said. "It falls without pause." She walked to the table and sliced the loaf the baker gave her. She handed a small piece to the girl and placed another near the fire to soften. The girl ate in slow bites. Eleanor stirred broth and held it to the girl's lips. "Drink a little more," she said. The girl sighed. "It warms my chest." Eleanor sat beside her. "I step out once the light grows stronger. I search for more supplies." The girl opened her eyes wider. "The snow looks high." "I walk with care," Eleanor replied. I followed the steps near the square. For the next hour, she waited for the lantern outside the parish hall to glow. Each morning, someone lit it as a sign the square opened for aid. When the faint orange light touched the street through thick snow, Eleanor took her shawl and prepared for another walk. She wrapped her daughter in blankets and kissed her forehead. "Sleep. I return before long." The girl reached for her hand. "Mother, bring warmth." Eleanor held her fingers for a moment. "I bring it." She stepped outside. Snow reached higher than before. She lifted her skirt and stepped through narrow pockets of loose snow. She leaned against walls for balance. A few neighbors worked near their doorways, shoveling small sections to reach Mr. Copley. A thin man with a crooked back struggled with a wooden shovel near his gate. He nodded toward Eleanor. "Tracks vanish fast," he said. "Each hour," Eleanor replied. I walked toward the square. "Do you need anything?" He shook his head. "My son brings bread today. Go on. Your child needs you." She thanked him and continued. The lane turned into a deep trench carved by earlier foot traffic. The snow reached nearly to her shoulders on both sides. She moved slow. The wind funneled through the narrow space, pressing hard against her coat. She held her scarf over her mouth and pushed forward step by step. Near the alley, she paused. The snow drifted in sharp angles. A stray cat crouched on a windowsill above the drift, tail curled tight around its body. Its eyes followed her as she passed. When she reached the square, a small group gathered near the parish hall, waiting for broth and blankets. A few children held tin cups close to their chests. Smoke rose from a pot outside the kitchen door. The priest worked with 2 women to serve each person in order. Eleanor stepped into the line. Snow fell steadily, soft but constant. She pulled the shawl tighter round her shoulders. The woman in front of her, Mrs. Blythe, turned with tired eyes. "Your daughter." Eleanor answered. "Her fever holds. She grows weaker in long hours without warm air." Mrs. Blythe nodded. "My husband struggles with a cough. Winter sharpens every breath." The priest reached Eleanor. You return early, he said. His beard held frost near the edges. I need broth for my girl, she said. He handed her a cup. Take coal also. The storeroom holds more today. She accepted a small cloth sack and held it tight. Thank you. She stepped aside and stood near the wall to warm her hands before heading home again. A short figure approached her. It was the man with the cart from the day before. His face flushed red from cold. Snow caked his shoulders. Eleanor, he said, you pushed my cart yesterday. I did what I could, she said. He shifted the sack he carried. I bring sled runners from the stable. They glide better over snow this thick. If you need help reaching your lane later, call for me. I manage, she said. Even so, his offer touched her. He nodded once and moved toward the kitchen door. Eleanor turned to leave the square. A sudden gust swept across the open space, lifting snow into a thick veil. She paused until it settled. Then she stepped toward the alley. Halfway down the alley, she heard a faint cry. She stopped. The sound drifted from a side passage near a shuttered shop. She stepped closer. Another cry reached her ears. Soft, weak, she turned the corner. A small boy sat in the snow beside a collapsed basket. He shivered without a coat. His hands pressed against his chest. Eleanor knelt before him. Where is your home? The boy looked up with wide eyes. I search for my mother. She told me to wait near the square. I waited. Then the snow rose. Eleanor lifted him into her arms. He felt light and cold. I take you to the parish. He shook his head. No, she waits for me. Eleanor raised her eyes toward the corner of the alley. No movement, no voices. The cold pressed harder with each breath. Your mother might search for you inside the hall, Eleanor said. We go there first. He held her shoulder. Do not leave me in the snow. I stay with you, she said. She carried him toward the square. Snow pushed against her legs, slowing every step. When she returned to the hall, Mrs. Blythe saw her and rushed forward. A child. He lost his mother, Eleanor said. The priest stepped over. Bring him inside. We warm him at once. Inside the hall, warmth filled the air. A stove burned along the far wall. Two women wrapped the boy in blankets. He sat near the heat, hands trembling. Eleanor waited beside him until color returned to his cheeks. The priest placed a hand on her shoulder. You saved him from the storm. He needed someone, Eleanor said. The boy whispered, thank you. Moments later, a woman burst through the door. Snow covered her dress. Her scarf hung loose. She saw the boy and rushed to him with a cry. My son, she said, voice shaking. I searched through every street. He stepped into her arms. She held him tight, rocking slow. The woman turned toward Eleanor. You brought him to safety. Eleanor nodded. He waited in the alley. The woman placed a hand over her heart. I owe you more than words. Eleanor looked away for a moment, touched yet humbled. Care for him. Keep him warm. She stepped outside again, knowing her daughter waited for broth. The storm surged once more. Her legs ached. Her fingers stiffened inside gloves. She walked through deep snow toward her lane. Halfway home, she saw Mr. Copley leaning against his fence. Snow piled high around him. His shovel lay on the ground. Eleanor, he called weakly. She hurried toward him. What troubles you? He pressed a hand to his chest. Wind took my breath. I need support. She helped him stand straight with slow effort. Lean on me. We walk to your doorstep. He nodded with gratitude. They stepped forward together. After a few slow strides, he reached his door. Thank you, he said. Eleanor placed a hand on his arm. Stay inside. The storm worsens. She turned and continued toward her cottage. Snow now reached the top of the gate. She pushed against the drift until the path opened enough for her body to pass. She stepped inside, shut the door, and exhaled. Her daughter sat up slightly. Mother, you look tired. Eleanor placed the broth beside her. Drink. The girl lifted the cup with both hands and sipped slowly. Eleanor knelt beside the bed. I found a boy lost in the alley, she said. I carried him to the hall. His mother found him there. The girl smiled faintly. You helped him. I help where I walk, Eleanor replied. She placed coal on the fire. The flame grew stronger, filling the room with warm light. Shadows softened across the walls. The storm outside roared harder, shaking the shutters. Eleanor sat near her daughter and brushed her hair. The girl's breathing steadied with each passing minute. Tell me something, the girl whispered. What do you wish to hear? Eleanor asked. Tell me what the square looked like today. Eleanor spoke in a soft tone. Lanterns glowed through thick snow. Children waited for broth. People stood close together. The baker brought warm loaves. The priest handed blankets to families who needed them. People helped one another without fear. The girl's eyelids drooped. It sounds warm. It holds more warmth than the storm outside, Eleanor said. The girl drifted into sleep once more. Eleanor sat in silence, listening to the wind scrape the cottage walls. The great snow thickened with each hour, but Eleanor felt a quiet strength settle inside her. She survived long nights before. She would survive this one. She rose, checked the latch, trimmed the candle, and returned to her daughter's side. The fire glowed steady. The storm raged without mercy. Yet inside the cottage, hope lingered. Eleanor whispered, "We endure another day." The next morning arrived without sunlight. A grey light pressed through the frost-covered window, faint and dull. Eleanor woke with a tight ache in her back from sleeping in the chair. The fire held only small embers. She rose at once and placed fresh wood on the grate. The flames rose in slow steps, spreading warmth across the room. Her daughter turned in the bed. Her breath still rasped, but her face held a little more color. Eleanor touched her forehead. Heat lingered, though not as sharp as the night before. The girl opened her eyes. "Mother, did the snow stop?" "No," Eleanor said. "It still falls strong." The girl looked toward the window. "It sounds louder." Eleanor nodded. The drifts grow high near every door. Eleanor helped her daughter sit up. She handed her a small piece of softened bread. The girl chewed slow, swallowing with effort. Eleanor poured a thin line of broth into a cup and held it out. "Drink," she said. The girl obeyed, then leaned back against the pillow with a tired breath. Eleanor wrapped her shawl around her shoulders. Her body felt heavy from the long night, but she knew she needed more supplies. Coal sat low. The broth from the hall might not last through the evening. She looked at her daughter. "I walk out again," she said softly. "I return with coal and more broth. I search for stronger herbs too." The girl reached for her hand. "Do not stay out long." "I walk straight to the hall and back," Eleanor said. "Sleep while I am away." The girl nodded. Eleanor stepped outside. The cold struck her at once, sharp and biting. Snow rose high on both sides of the lane. Only a narrow, uneven path remained from her walk yesterday. She leaned into each step. Her boots sank deep, trapping her ankles. She pulled them free again and again. A man stood near a corner cottage, breaking ice from his roof with a long pole. When he saw Eleanor, he lowered the pole. "You head toward the square again?" he asked. "Yes," she said. He rubbed his hands together. The drifts near the alley reach chest high now. "Take the right path. The left one sinks near the wall." "I take the right," Eleanor said. "Keep your scarf tight," he added. She thanked him and moved forward. The right path held more packed snow, easier to cross. She stepped slowly, holding the wall for support. The wind funneled through the lane. Loose flakes flew against her face. She lowered her head and continued. When she reached the alley, she stopped. The snow piled in strange shapes near the entrance. It looked taller than yesterday, forming rounded peaks where the wind shifted directions. She sensed hidden dips beneath the surface. She reached her foot forward and pressed lightly. The snow dropped under her weight, but held firm enough for a step. She crossed the alley with care at the far end. She saw the larger drift the man warned her about. It reached nearly to her chest. She pushed her shoulder against it, parting a narrow section. Snow slid down her arms. She dug a small opening and squeezed through. The square came into view. A group of people pushed snow away from the hall entrance. They worked with long-handled shovels. Some formed a line to move sacks inside. The hall doors stood open, releasing a thick wave of warm air into the cold. Eleanor stepped onto the square. Her legs trembled from the effort. She walked toward the hall inside. The heat felt almost heavy. The stove burned bright. The priest handed blankets to a pair of shivering children. The boy Eleanor rescued sat near the stove with his mother. He wore a thick coat now, drying near the fire. When he saw Eleanor, he rose and hurried toward her. "You saved me," he said. She gave him a soft smile. "You rest today." His mother stepped over and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "He speaks of you every hour," she said. "Your kindness lives in our home." Eleanor nodded with a quiet breath. "Keep him near the fire. The storm grows stronger." The priest approached her. "Your daughter." "The fever holds," Eleanor said. He opened a pot and filled a cup. "Take this," he said. "It holds stronger herbs today." Volunteers searched the storeroom. Eleanor accepted it. "Thank you." He handed her a small sack of coal. "Take more." The nights grow longer by the hour. A woman approached with bundles of cloth. Her name was Margaret, the parish seamstress. She looked older than Eleanor remembered from summers past. Her eyes held deep weariness. "Your daughter needs warmth," Margaret said. She held out a thick knitted shawl. "I finished this before dawn. Take it for her." Eleanor hesitated. "You need it too." "I have another," Margaret replied. "Take this. Those with fever lose strength fast." Eleanor wrapped the shawl around her arm. "I thank you." Margaret nodded without a word and returned to sewing near the window. The hall filled quickly as the morning passed. Families arrived with buckets to collect broth. Men carried sacks of coal, placing them on sled runners to drag across the square. Children huddled near the stove, some holding pieces of bread, some holding blankets. Eleanor stepped outside once more. The wind howled across the square. sending spirals of snow into the air. The drifts near the bakery reached the windowsills now. The baker stood outside, sweeping snow from his doorway. "Eleanor," he called. "Come warm yourself for a moment." She approached. "I head home now." He handed her a small roll wrapped in paper. "Take this for your daughter, fresh from the oven." Eleanor placed it next to the broth. "She wakes at midday." The baker nodded. "Strong girl. She holds through the storm." Eleanor turned toward the alley. The snow there shifted with the wind, rising in rolling forms. She stepped slowly. Halfway through, her foot slipped beneath a hidden layer of ice. She caught herself on a windowsill. Her breath stung her throat from the cold air. She pushed forward until she reached the lane, near the far end. Mr. Copley struggled at his doorway again. His shovel lay on the ground. He leaned heavily on his gate. Eleanor hurried toward him. "Mr. Copley," she said, "lean on me." He lifted his head. "I tried to clear more, but the wind drives it back." "Stay inside," Eleanor said. "I bring help later if you need more coal." He nodded weakly and stepped into his cottage. Eleanor passed through the deep trench of snow. She reached her door and pushed inside with both hands. The cottage felt warmer than the day before thanks to the preserved embers. Her daughter sat up in bed, eyes half open. "You returned," she whispered. Eleanor rushed to her and placed the cup of broth beside her lips. "Drink slow," she said. The girl swallowed several small sips. Her cheeks gained slight color again. Eleanor wrapped the knitted shawl around her shoulders. The girl touched its edge. "Where did this come from?" "Margaret made it," Eleanor said. "It feels soft," the girl whispered. Eleanor brushed her hair. "You rest." She placed the fresh roll near her daughter and warmed her hands near the fire. The snow outside pressed hard against the windows now, rising to the middle of the glass. The storm grew stronger. She heard wind strike the roof with sharp bursts. Hours passed in silence. Eleanor sat near the window and watched the lane disappear under growing drifts. The world outside faded into white. No footsteps passed. No carts moved through the street. The town hid under the great snow like a buried world. Near dusk, a faint knock reached the door. Eleanor lifted her head. Another knock, soft, weak. She rose fast and opened the door. A man stood outside, hunched against the cold. His hat drooped under fallen snow. His breath came in short puffs. "Eleanor," he said, "the parish sent word. They ask for help." A roof near the hall buckled under weight. People rushed to clear it. Eleanor blinked at him. "Who asked for me?" "Margaret," he said. She said, "You move steady through the drifts. They need hands to carry blankets and tools." Eleanor looked back at her daughter. The girl slept now, breath slow and even. The knitted shawl covered her chest. "I step out again," Eleanor whispered to herself. She pulled her scarf tight. The man stepped aside as she exited. Snow reached almost to her waist again. The sky darkened fast. They walked together toward the square through a narrow path carved earlier in the day. When they reached the square, a crowd gathered near a collapsed roof beside the parish hall. Ice and snow fell onto the walkway. People cleared debris with poles and shovels. Children carried small tools. Women passed blankets to protect anyone working beneath the broken beams. Margaret waved from the hall steps. "Eleanor, here." Eleanor hurried toward her. "What happened?" "The old storehouse roof gave way," Margaret said. "Some stood inside when it fell. No injuries, but we must clear it before night freezes the beams. Eleanor tied her shawl tighter and lifted a broken plank from the pile. She worked beside others, passing wood down a line toward the square's edge. The wind made each movement heavier. Voices rose through the storm. Lift here. Clear the doorway. Bring lanterns. Lanterns lined the edge of the square, glowing faintly through snow. Their light flickered under the gust's dot. For hours they worked without pause. Snow piled on their shoulders. Their breath came in sharp bursts. At last, the final beams were cleared. Margaret approached Eleanor with shaking hands. You gave strength today. Eleanor wiped snow from her brow. We all worked. Margaret looked toward the hall. Come inside and warm yourself. Eleanor shook her head. My daughter waits. I return before the storm grows worse. Margaret touched her arm. Walk safe. Eleanor stepped back into the alley. The snow reached deeper now. She pushed against drifts. Her legs ached. Her fingers stiffened. The sky darkened further as the storm strengthened. When she reached her cottage, she leaned against the door before opening it. Her daughter stirred as she entered. Mother, I am here, Eleanor whispered. She placed more coal on the fire, warmed broth, and fed her daughter slow sips. Did you help someone again? The girl asked. Yes, Eleanor said. A roof fell near the hall. People worked together. The girl nodded. The town needs you. Eleanor brushed her hair. The town needs all of us. The storm raged harder, shaking the shutters. Snow beat against the door, but the fire held strong, filling the room with soft light. Eleanor sat beside her daughter and whispered, We endured this night too. The storm eased before dawn, but the cold grew stronger. Eleanor woke to sharp silence. No wind, no shifting snow, no footsteps on the lane. She rose and checked her daughter. The girl slept with slower breaths. The fever cooled through the night. Eleanor placed her hand on her cheek, warm though not fierce. Relief spread through her in a quiet wave. She stepped to the window. The glass held thick frost. She scraped a small circle and looked out. The lane disappeared under high mounds. The drift near Mr. Copley's doorway reached almost to his roof. Lanterns from the night before stood half buried, their handles frozen into solid white. Eleanor wrapped herself in the knitted shawl and placed a piece of coal on the grate. The fire caught with effort. She warmed her hands before lifting the pot of broth. Her daughter opened her eyes. Morning? Yes, Eleanor said. Drink a little. The girl swallowed a few sips and smiled weakly. The room feels warmer. Eleanor nodded. The fire held strong through the night. The girl looked toward the window. It looked strange, as if the outside changed. The snow rose higher, Eleanor said. The storm left its mark. A soft thump struck the door. Eleanor froze. The thump came again. She stepped toward the door and listened. A low voice called from outside, muffled under layers of snow. Eleanor, help if you are able. She recognized the voice. Mr. Copley. She opened the door. Snow pushed inward, spilling across the floor. Mr. Copley stood in the narrow opening he carved with his shovel. His face looked pale. His breath shook. Eleanor, he said, my roof sagged through the night. The beams groan. I fear the weight. Come warm yourself, Eleanor said. Sit near the fire. He shook his head. I stay outside. I need another pair of hands. I need someone steady. I left the cottage twice, but the drift traps me. I need help to clear the roof before it sinks." Eleanor looked back at her daughter. The girl watched with tired eyes. "I return soon," Eleanor said to her. "Stay near the fire." The girl nodded. "I rest." Eleanor stepped outside. The cold bit deep. Mr. Copley handed her the shovel. "I cleared the lower edges," he said. "The top holds thick snow. We remove it in layers." They climbed the side path he carved with long effort. Snow reached their knees. The roof sagged under the weight. The center dipped inward with each light creak. "We work fast," Mr. Copley said. Eleanor pushed the shovel into the thick snow. She lifted small piles and slid them down the roof's edge. Mr. Copley worked beside her. Their breath rose in sharp clouds. The snow felt dense, packed through storms, hard as pressed wool. They broke it with the shovel edges and scraped until the roof creaked in shorter intervals. "Eleanor," Mr. Copley said, "stop a moment." She paused. The roof shifted slightly under their feet. A low groan echoed below them. Eleanor stepped toward the edge. "It grows worse," she said. He wiped his brow. "Remove what you can. I hold the beam below from inside if needed." "No," Eleanor said. "I clear more from here. You stay outside. If the roof falls, you stay safe." He hesitated, then nodded. She continued. Each movement drained warmth from her fingers. Each shovel of snow pressed against her back. But the weight on the roof grew lighter. The creaks softened. At last, most of the top layer cleared. Mr. Copley tapped the beam near the edge. "It holds better now." Eleanor stepped off the roof and sank knee-deep in the drift. "You saved my cottage," he said. "I owe you strength I no longer possess." Eleanor handed him the shovel. "You rest inside and warm your hands." He nodded and stepped toward his doorway. Eleanor turned toward her own cottage. Snow swallowed the lane in tall white walls. She moved through slowly, her legs shaking from effort. When she reached the door, she leaned against it for breath before stepping in. Her daughter stirred. "Mother, you look tired." "I worked on Mr. Copley's roof," Eleanor said. It needed clearing. The girl lifted the knitted shawl around her. "You help all the neighbors." Eleanor knelt beside her and brushed her hair. "People help each other in winters like this." The girl smiled faintly and closed her eyes again. Eleanor placed more coal on the fire and prepared. Another small cup of broth. While the pot warmed, she listened. Outside, no wind moved. No footsteps broke the silence. The whole lane lay under a thick stillness that reached into her chest. Winter held the town in a soft, heavy grip. Hours passed. Near midday, a distant bell rang. Once, then again, faint through the snow. Eleanor knew that sound, the parish hall bell. Not for worship, for need. She stood and wrapped her shawl around her shoulders. The girl opened her eyes. "Where do you go?" "The hall calls for help again," Eleanor said. "I return soon." The girl nodded and drifted back to rest. Eleanor stepped outside. The snow rose to her waist. She pushed through with slow, deliberate steps. When she reached the alley, a group of people gathered there. Margaret waved her over. "Eleanor," she said, "you arrive fast." "What is needed?" Eleanor asked. "A store cart overturned near the square," Margaret said. "Barrels of grain lie scattered under snow. We clear the area and carry what remains inside before it freezes solid." Eleanor nodded. "Lead the way," They moved through a narrow path cut earlier. When they reached the square, the overturned cart lay on its side. The wheel snapped. A horse stood under blankets, held by two men. The driver knelt beside a broken barrel, trying to lift it alone. Eleanor stepped forward. "Let me help." She gripped the barrel with him. Snow slid off its surface. Together they lifted it upright. Grain spilled through a crack in its side. Eleanor held it steady while another man wrapped it in cloth. "Carry it to the hall," the driver said. "Save what we can." She lifted one end and walked toward the hall as the man held the other. The weight pressed on her arms, but she held steady. Inside the hall, volunteers gathered the spilled grain and poured it into sacks. She returned for another barrel. Then another. The cold tightened her muscles. Her breath grew shallow. Margaret handed her a cup of warm water. "Drink," she whispered. Eleanor swallowed it and nodded. The square held the same stillness as the lane. Snow drifted from rooftops in slow sheets. The sky hung low, heavy and pale. When the last barrel reached the hall, the priest stepped outside. "You keep the town alive this week," he said to everyone. "Go home and rest. Night falls early today." People nodded and drifted away in small groups. Some carried blankets. Some held sacks. Children followed behind, their feet sinking in soft prints. Eleanor turned back toward the lane. The path home felt longer. The drifts reached her hips. Each step required strength she no longer held. But she moved forward with steady breaths. When she reached her cottage, she pulled the door shut behind her and sat near the fire. Her body trembled with exhaustion. Her daughter reached for her hand. "You returned," she said. "Yes," Eleanor whispered. "The day held more work than I expected." The girl pressed her head against Eleanor's arm. "Sit with me for a while." Eleanor nodded and held her close. Outside, snow slid from rooftops. Quiet flakes drifted in slow descent. The storm's force eased, but its weight lingered. Eleanor warmed broth and shared a small portion with her daughter. The girl drank with more strength now. Her breaths no longer rasped as sharply. The fire crackled with soft rhythm. Shadows along the walls warmed the room as dusk fell. A soft knock sounded at the door. Eleanor rose and opened it. The baker stood outside with a wrapped loaf. "I saved this for you," he said. Fresh and warm. Eleanor bowed her head. "My daughter thanks you too." He smiled. "The storm eases for now, but night grows colder. Keep your fire fed." "I will," Eleanor said. He stepped away. Climbing through the narrow path that led toward the square, Eleanor closed the door and placed the loaf near the fire's warmth. She stepped to the bed. "Here," she said. "Fresh bread." The girl smiled and reached for a small piece. Eleanor watched her eat with slow satisfaction. Night settled with soft stillness. The storm quieted. The house held a deep warmth. Eleanor rested her head beside her daughter and listened to the soft breaths in the quiet room. Another day survived. Another night endured. Dawn rose without color. The sky sat low, flat and pale, as if the world lost its edge. Eleanor woke before her daughter. Her back ached from the long work of the day before. She moved slow, careful not to stir the girl, and placed wood on the grate. The fire caught with soft cracks. Her daughter turned in the bed and opened tired eyes. "Mother, is it morning?" "Yes," Eleanor said. "Rest a little longer." The girl closed her eyes again. Her breath sounded smoother now. Relief settled over Eleanor as she touched her daughter's forehead. The heat shrank through the night, not gone, but lighter. Eleanor wrapped the knitted shawl around her shoulders. She stepped to the window and scraped frost from the glass. The lane looked strange today. The drifts stood taller than gates. Some reached windows, others leaned against roofs. A deep hush lay over everything. A soft knock sounded at the door. Eleanor opened it a small width. A young girl stood outside with a small parcel. "Eleanor," she said, trembling from cold, "the parish asks for you again. Supplies from the harbour arrived late last night. A sled team pulled them through the eastern road. They need hands at the hall." Eleanor nodded. "I follow you soon. Warm yourself first." The girl shook her head. "I must pass more messages." Eleanor handed her a piece of bread. "Take this then." The girl smiled before hurrying down the lane. Eleanor looked toward her daughter. "I go to the hall. I return soon." The girl whispered, "I feel stronger today." Eleanor brushed her hair. "Your strength grows. Keep the shawl near your chest." She stepped outside and pushed through the path she carved yesterday. Snow reached higher now. Frost filled the air. Her breath puffed in short clouds. She leaned into each step, gripping the wall when her weight slipped. When she reached Mr. Copley's cottage, she paused. Smoke rose from his chimney, a good sign. She knocked lightly on his window. He opened the shutter a small gap. "Eleanor," he said, "you walk toward the hall." "Yes," she said. "Take the right path," he murmured. The left one sank again. "A deep dip waits there. I follow your advice." He closed his shutter. She stepped on the right path, stayed firm under her boots. She climbed over a ridge where snow reached near her hip. The wind pressed against her back, though not sharp today, more steady, more quiet. When she reached the alley, she found two men digging a narrow trench. Their shovels clinked against hidden crates buried under snow. "Eleanor," one said, "the hall needs more hands." "I head there now," she replied. He pointed toward the far end. "Take care near the square." A pile slid from the roof of the cooper's shop. "I move with care," she said. She crossed the alley. The drifts reached odd angles from the night's shifting winds. She stepped lightly, testing each spot before placing her full weight down. A hidden dip cracked beneath her foot once, but she caught herself on the edge of a barrel half buried in snow. At last she reached the square. The sight caught her breath. A sled team stood near the hall steps, their horses covered in thick blankets. The sled held crates of grain, herbs, salt, and small tools. Volunteers formed a line to carry the crates inside. Margaret waved her over. "Eleanor, we prayed you would come." Eleanor stepped to her side. "Tell me what is needed." Margaret handed her a small ledger. "We sort the herbs. Place them in baskets. The sick across the town need them. The storm weakened many." Eleanor nodded and followed Margaret inside the hall. The hall felt warmer than ever. Fires burned in two stoves. Blankets hung on walls to keep heat in. Children sat near the entrance, waiting with small bowls for broth. The priest moved between groups, handing out water and pieces of bread. Eleanor stepped to a table where herbs lay in heaps, some dried, some fresh enough to keep their scent. She picked through them with careful hands and sorted them into baskets. Margaret joined her. "Your daughter?" she asked. "She rests with less fever," Eleanor said. Margaret smiled. "The shawl suits her, I hope." She holds it close, Eleanor replied. A woman approached the table. Her hands shook. Her eyes looked tired. My husband coughs without pause, she said. Do you have herbs to ease his chest? Eleanor handed her a bundle wrapped in cloth. Boil this in water. Let him breathe the steam. Then give him a sip. The woman clutched it with gratitude. Thank you. Bless you. The morning passed in steady work. More families entered with need. More herbs left the baskets. More broth heated in the pot. The hall filled with soft footsteps and low voices around midday. The priest approached Eleanor. A message arrived, he said. A neighbor from the East District needs help. A roof beam cracked during the night. The house holds a mother and 3 small children. They need hands to clear snow from the roof before it falls. Eleanor took a breath. Where is the house? Near the old mill road, he said. Farther than the square. Hard snow lies between. Margaret placed a hand on Eleanor's arm. I go with you, she said. Eleanor nodded. Then we walked together. They gathered shovels, ropes, and a lantern. A man joined them, pulling a small sled with tools. The 3 stepped into the square. Snow reached the tops of the barrels lining the edge. Their boots sank deep with each step. The path narrowed as they moved past the cooper's shop. A slide of snow spilled from the roof overnight, covering much of the walkway. Eleanor stepped first. She pushed through with slow strength. Margaret followed close behind, gripping the sled rope. The man kept to the back. Steadying the lantern, they reached the mill road after a long struggle. A small cottage sat half hidden behind a mound of snow. Smoke drifted from a short chimney. A woman stood outside, waving her arms. Thank goodness, she called. I feared no one would reach us. Eleanor approached her. Show me the roof. The woman pointed upward. The center beam cracked. I heard it strain. I moved the children to the far corner of the house. Eleanor stepped to the roof and tested the snow. It felt heavy, pressed by days of storms. A deep layer hid the sagging beam. We work in small sections, Eleanor said. Margaret, clear the lower edge. I start at the top. Margaret pushed her shovel into the snow and lifted it off the roof's edge. Eleanor climbed the small ladder the man held steady. She reached the center and pushed the shovel into the dense snow. It resisted her. She forced it through with steady effort and lifted a heavy mass off the roof. Snow slid down the sides in thick sheets. The cottage groaned under the weight. Margaret called from below, "We must hurry." Eleanor nodded. She pushed harder, breaking through the top layer. Large chunks tumbled down. The man gathered them and tossed them away from the cottage. The beam creaked again. Eleanor worked faster. Snow flew from her shovel in steady rhythm. Her breath grew sharp. Her arms burned, but the roof lightened with each motion. Then the final layer broke free. The roof straightened a little, the strain easing. The woman let out a weak sob. Bless you. Bless all of you. Eleanor climbed down. Her legs shook from the effort. Margaret wrapped a blanket around the mother's shoulders. Keep the children warm, Margaret said. I do, the woman replied. I kept them near the stove. Eleanor stepped inside the cottage. 3 small children huddled with blankets near a dim fire. Their eyes looked wide but calm. You are safe now, Eleanor said gently. Your roof holds. The smallest child pointed at her shawl. Your shawl looks warm. Eleanor smiled. A friend made it. They stayed long enough to check each room for damage. Then they prepared to leave. The woman pressed a small sack of dried fruit into Eleanor's hand. "Please take this. I have more than enough. You brought life back to us today." Eleanor hesitated, then accepted it with a small bow. The walk back took longer. Snow thickened in the air again, though not fierce like before. A steady fall, soft and dense. When they reached the square, Margaret squeezed Eleanor's hand. "You hold strength beyond measure," she whispered. Eleanor lowered her head. "I hold enough for today." She walked toward the lane. Her steps felt heavy, her fingers numb, but her heart carried a quiet peace. When she reached her cottage, she opened the door and felt the wave of warmth wash over her. Her daughter looked up with a faint smile. "You returned," she said. "Yes," Eleanor whispered. "I returned." She gave her the small piece of dried fruit. The girl chewed it slow, savoring each bit. "You look tired," the girl said. "I rest soon," Eleanor replied. The day held much work. She warmed broth again and sat with her daughter. The fire crackled. Snow tapped softly against the window. A dim peace filled the room. Night settled in slow layers. Outside, the town quieted again under the great snow. Inside, mother and daughter held warmth, hope, and steady breath. Another winter day survived. The next morning arrived with a thin line of light pressing through the frost on the window. Eleanor woke before the fire dimmed too low. She rose with slow movements, feeling the tight pull in her shoulders from the long work of the day before. She placed 2 small pieces of coal on the grate and waited for the flame to rise. Her daughter shifted in the bed. "Mother." "I am here," Eleanor said. "How do you feel?" The girl touched her own forehead, as if searching for the heat she grew used to. "I feel lighter. My chest hurts less." Eleanor pressed her hand to her daughter's brow. Warm, but not burning. Her breath sounded calmer. Her cheeks held more color. Relief spread through Eleanor's chest. "You grow stronger," she whispered. The girl smiled and curled under the new shawl. "The storm sounds far away today." Eleanor stepped to the window and scraped a fresh circle through the frost. The snow still lay high, but the sky held a soft blue that she had not seen in days. No wind, no drifting sheets falling from rooftops. The town rested. She prepared a small cup of broth and fed her daughter. The girl drank each sip with new strength. "You must eat too," the girl said. "I will," Eleanor replied. Later, a knock sounded at the door, short, light, measured. Eleanor opened it. Margaret stood outside, wrapped in 2 wool layers. Her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Eleanor," she said, "the hall asks for you." Eleanor met her eyes. "What has happened?" "A message arrived from the North Lane," Margaret said. "A family lost their supply cart. It tipped in the night and the sacks froze under the snow. They need hands to pull the cart upright and gather what they can." Eleanor nodded. "I follow you. Give me a moment." She turned to her daughter. "I step out again. I return before midday." The girl nodded. "I feel well enough to sleep until then." Eleanor brushed her hair and placed extra blankets on her bed. She stepped outside with Margaret. The air stung but did not bite like before. The storm weakened. Snow still rose high, but the paths people dug over the past days held firm. They walked toward the square. When they reached it, they found a group of volunteers waiting with long ropes and sled runners. The priest stood among them. "Eleanor," he said, "your steps have strength. We head to the north lane. The cart lies deep near the old stone wall." Eleanor nodded once. "Then we walk." The group moved together. The north lane held narrower paths. Snow pressed high against the cottages. Icicles clung to eaves. A thin haze of cold hung in the air. They reached the stone wall. The cart lay tipped on its side, one wheel half buried. A man knelt beside it, trying to pull a sack from beneath the drift. A woman stood behind him, clutching a baby wrapped in blankets. Eleanor stepped forward. "We help you lift the cart." The man looked up with tired eyes. "Thank you." The wheel froze in place. "I tried all morning." One of the volunteers tied a rope around the cart's upper rail. Another braced the side. Eleanor took hold of the rope with Margaret beside her. "Pull on my count," the man said. "Lift steady." He raised his hand. 1, 2, pull. They leaned back together, the rope straining. The cart lifted an inch, then another. Snow slid from the side. The cart creaked as it righted itself. They pushed until it landed upright. The man exhaled in relief. "You saved us. My children need these supplies." Eleanor knelt to check the sacks. Most held grain. Some cracked. She pressed a few with her hand. "These remain good," she said. "The hall can warm the grain to soften it again." The woman stepped forward. "We feared the worst last night. You brought hope here." Eleanor nodded but said nothing. She helped load the sacks onto the sled runner. They carried the supplies back to the hall. The air grew warmer the closer they walked. The hall doors stood open. Heat poured out from the stoves. Inside, volunteers sorted grain, folded blankets, and prepared new pots of broth. Her mother's voice echoed from somewhere in the hall. Eleanor turned to Mrs. Carter, one of the oldest women in the parish, leaned on a cane and approached her with slow steps. "Eleanor," she said, "I heard of your work these days. Your hands leave light wherever they pass." Eleanor bowed her head. "I serve where needed." Mrs. Carter smiled. "And from that service grows strength." She placed a small linen pouch in Eleanor's hands. "Take this: bay leaf, elderflower, and willow bark. Steep it for your daughter. It helps the lungs clear." Eleanor's breath softened. "Thank you. You earned far more than this," Mrs. Carter said. "But herbs serve better than praise." Eleanor left the hall soon after. She stepped outside into the quiet square. The sky brightened. A faint column of sunlight touched the snow piles. Children played near the far side of the square, rolling snow into small mounds. Their laughter seemed soft after days of silence. Eleanor walked toward the lane at the alley. She met a boy dragging a small sled. It held fresh kindling. "Where did this come from?" Eleanor asked. "Mr. Turner gave it," the boy said. "He split wood all morning. He told me to bring some to your cottage." Eleanor paused, touched by the gesture. "Thank him when you return." "I will," the boy said, hurrying off. Eleanor pulled the sled behind her through the lane. Snow still reached high, but the path felt easier today. She reached her cottage and stepped inside. Her daughter sat upright for the first time in days. "You look stronger," Eleanor said. "I woke with breath that did not hurt," the girl replied, "and I waited for you." Eleanor knelt beside her and prepared a warm drink with Mrs. Carter's herbs. The scent filled the room with comfort. "Drink this," Eleanor said. The girl sipped slowly. It tastes sharp. It brings healing, Eleanor said. She fed her a small piece of fresh bread. The girl ate with steady appetite for the first time since the storm began. Eleanor sat near the fire and warmed her hands. The new kindling stacked beside the great promised warmth for days. Her daughter leaned against her shoulder. "Mother," the girl whispered, "what happened today?" "I helped lift a cart in the north lane," Eleanor said. "The family needed hands, and the hall." "Are the people better?" "They endure," Eleanor replied. "The hall carries the town." The girl let out a soft breath. "The snow feels less heavy today." "It does," Eleanor said. "But winter holds us still." Hours passed in calm silence. Eleanor cleaned the table, prepared a small stew, and checked the window for signs of a new storm. The sky stayed quiet. Near midday, a soft tapping echoed from outside. Not a knock. A rhythm, tap-tap. Tap-dat. Eleanor opened the door. A young boy stood there holding a folded letter in both hands. His boots sank deep in the snow. "Eleanor," he said, "a message arrived from the parish store. They need you again. Someone found a trapped traveler near the old bridge. He lies weak and frozen. They bring him to the square. They ask for blankets and broth." Eleanor nodded. "I come at once." She turned to her daughter. "I return before the sun lowers." The girl touched her hand. "Go, help him." Eleanor wrapped her shawl tightly. She grabbed 2 blankets and placed them under her arm. The walk to the square proved slow. Snow hardened into thick layers, uneven across the path. Eleanor stepped with care, making sure not to slip. When she reached the square, a crowd gathered. 2 men carried a man across a sled. His face looked white as chalk, his hands stiff, his coat torn on one side. The priest met Eleanor. "We found him near the old bridge, half buried. He must have tried to reach town before the storm trapped him." Eleanor stepped beside the sled and placed a blanket over him. Margaret brought another. Together they wrapped the man in layers and carried him into the hall. They laid him near the stove. His breath came in shallow bursts. Eleanor prepared warm broth and placed a small cloth, soaked in warm water, over his hands. "How long was he out there?" she asked the men. "1 day, maybe 2, one replied. "He held onto a post near the bridge. If the snow fell harder, he would have vanished under it." Eleanor looked at the man's face. He appeared in his 30s. His beard held frost near the edges. His lips trembled as warmth returned. The priest approached. "Do you think he survives?" "He holds breath," Eleanor said. "We watch over him. The warmth helps." Hours passed, the hall filled with new arrivals, drawn by the news. Some brought herbs, some brought blankets, some stood back in silence. The man stirred near evening. His eyes opened slightly, dry, confused. "Where?" he whispered. "You are safe," Eleanor said. "The hall found you." He blinked at her. "I walked from the river road. Lost the path. Snow too high. Rest now," Eleanor said. "Your strength returns tonight." He closed his eyes and breathed slower. As evening sank into night, the hall grew quiet again. Volunteers left one by one. Margaret approached Eleanor. "You stayed through the day," she said. Eleanor nodded. "My daughter rests with less fever." Margaret touched her shoulder. "And you gave strength to many." Eleanor looked at the bundled man. He brings another story into this winter. Margaret smiled. Winter collects stories faster than snow. Eleanor walked home through the dimming light. The cold settled again, though not as fierce. When she reached her cottage, she found her daughter awake, the fire reflecting in her eyes. "You returned," the girl said. Eleanor knelt beside her. A traveller needed help. Now he rests in the hall. The girl laid her hand on Eleanor's. "You help everyone." Eleanor brushed her cheek. "We all help each other." She warmed a cup of broth and gave it to her daughter. The girl drank it without trouble. Her strength returned slowly, steady as a candle flame. Outside, night fell in soft waves. Inside, mother and daughter shared warmth, quiet breath, and the end of another long winter day. Morning rose with a thin glimmer across the frost. Eleanor woke with stiff hands and a heavy pull in her shoulders. She sat up slow. The fire held a faint glow. She placed small wood pieces on the grate and warmed her palms above the weak flame. Her daughter lifted her head. "Mother, I feel stronger today." Eleanor pressed her palm to the girl's cheek. "Warm, steady, no sharp heat. Your breath sounds clear." The girl smiled. "I dreamed of the square. Children with sleds." "You will see them soon," Eleanor whispered. Eleanor fed her a spoon of broth. The girl swallowed with no struggle. A fresh ease filled her face. Eleanor felt relief settle through her ribs. A soft knock reached the door. Eleanor opened it, a small width. Margaret stood outside with snow caught in her lashes. "The traveller woke near dawn," she said. "He asks for you." Eleanor wrapped her shawl. "I follow you." She turned to her daughter. "I visit the hall. I return fast." The girl nodded. "I wait here." Eleanor stepped outside. The air carried a mild bite. Snow lay deep, though paths carved by the town held. She and Margaret walked together toward the square. Smoke drifted from chimneys in thin lines at the hall. Warm air washed over them. Voices murmured inside. The traveller sat near the stove with blankets wrapped around his shoulders. His face held more colour. His hands rested near the heat. He looked up as Eleanor approached. "You cared for me yesterday," he said. His voice rasped, but stronger than before. "You faced a hard night," Eleanor said. "The snow traps paths in strange ways." He lowered his head. "I lost track near the river road. Wind hid the markers. My lantern died. I walked until I fell." Eleanor checked his hands. The skin held faint cracks. "Warmth returns," she said. He nodded. "Your town saved me." Margaret stepped forward. "Do you have kin nearby?" He shook his head. "I head toward the southern mill. Work waits there." Eleanor said, "You rest here until strength returns." The roads stay blocked. The priest neared with a bowl of broth. "Eat. Warm your chest." The traveller nodded and ate. Eleanor glanced around the hall. Families gathered near tables. Volunteers folded blankets. The atmosphere felt softer now. Less strain, less fear. Margaret took Eleanor's arm. "Stay a moment. New tasks arrive soon." Eleanor sighed. "The storm leaves no one still." They stepped outside. A man hurried toward them from the far side of the square. "Eleanor," he called. "I need you." The well near the east gate froze. Ice blocks the lower section. We need hands to break it. Eleanor nodded. "Lead the way." Margaret stayed at the hall. Eleanor followed the man toward the east gate. Snow lay in thick ridges. The well sat beside a stone wall. 3 men huddled around it, holding iron rods. One lifted his head. Ice locks, the bucket rope. No drop of water since dawn. Eleanor stepped close. Show me where it binds. The man pointed. Here. Ice formed across the rim. She gripped an iron rod, struck the rim once, twice, 3 times. The ice cracked. A small piece split off. One man lowered the bucket. It sank a little, then jammed again. Eleanor struck another section. A larger crack opened. Together they chipped away at the frozen layer. Ice fragments fell into the snow. After several minutes, the bucket dropped fully. A moment later, they pulled it up, brimming with cold water. The men cheered softly. One handed Eleanor a cup. She drank a small sip. The cold hit her tongue like stone. She handed it back. You saved us, one man said. Eleanor shook her head. We worked together. She stepped back from the well. Her hands shook from the strike of the rod. She rubbed them together for warmth. A woman approached with a basket. Take this, she said. Fresh scones. I baked them at dawn. Your daughter needs strength. Eleanor accepted the basket. You bless our home. The woman smiled and walked toward the hall. Eleanor returned to her cottage at once. Her daughter sat up with a steady posture. Her face glowed with new energy. Mother, she said, you look tired. Eleanor placed the basket beside her. Work keeps me warm. The girl lifted a scone. It smells lovely. Eat slow, Eleanor said. The girl chewed with hunger not felt in days. Eleanor sat beside her and smoothed her hair. Did you help someone again? The girl asked. Yes, Eleanor said. The well froze. Water flows again. The girl pressed her cheek to Eleanor's arm. The town holds because of people like you. Eleanor kissed her forehead. The town holds because of all of us. A knock sounded again. This one, stronger. Eleanor opened the door. Mr. Copley stood outside, leaning on his gate. Eleanor, he said, I thank you again. My roof holds. I slept without fear last night. Eleanor nodded. Your cottage stands firm. He handed her a small bundle wrapped in cloth, root vegetables. Take them. They last through storms. She accepted them. You need them too. He smiled. I share what I have. Eleanor closed the door and placed the bundle on the table. Her daughter sat up straighter. Mother, I want to help today. Eleanor paused. You rest more. I rest enough, the girl said. I sit near the fire and sort herbs. People give you herbs. I sort them. I place them in small piles. Eleanor considered her. The girl's breath held strength. Her cheeks warmed with new color. Sit near the fire, Eleanor said. I bring the herbs. She placed dried leaves and small sprigs near her daughter. The girl separated them into neat piles with careful fingers. The air warmed. The cottage filled with quiet purpose. Near midday, a shout echoed from the lane. Eleanor, help needed at the bakery. Eleanor grabbed her shawl. She reached the bakery and found 3 women outside with shovels. Snow blocked the back door. The baker leaned against the wall, wiping sweat from his brow. The oven holds heat, he said, but smoke fills the kitchen. The back vent froze shut. Eleanor stepped toward the drift. We clear it. She and the women dug fast. Snow fell away in heavy clumps. Eleanor hit solid ice with her shovel. She struck it again until the layer cracked. Steam puffed from the vent as air finally escaped. The baker opened the back door. Heat rolled out in thick waves. Bless you, he said. Bread rises again. Eleanor wiped snow from her sleeves and nodded. One woman pressed a small tin into her hands. Warm honey. Your daughter needs sweetness." Eleanor accepted it with quiet gratitude. When she returned home, her daughter looked up. "Were you gone long?" "Only for a moment," Eleanor said. She gave her a small spoon of honey. The girl's eyes brightened. "It tastes warm." Eleanor fed her a small stew. The girl finished it with ease. Afternoon passed in slow hours. The fire crackled. The herbs sat sorted in neat rows. Eleanor stepped outside often to check the sky. Snow fell soft, thin, gentle. No storm, no threat. By late afternoon, a distant horn echoed across the town. Eleanor lifted her head. The sound came again. Once, twice. A long call. Margaret arrived minutes later. Breath, quick. "Eleanor," she said, "the hall asks for you again." A child went missing near the southern ridge. His brother lost him in the snow while gathering wood. People search now. Eleanor closed the door with haste. She turned to her daughter. "I must go. I stay safe," the girl said. "Bring him home." Eleanor stepped into the lane. The snow held her ankles. She followed Margaret toward the southern ridge. A group of townsfolk gathered there with lanterns. Tracks in the snow led toward a narrow path behind a row of stacked crates. The wind shifted the prints, fading them. The priest stepped toward Eleanor. A boy of 6 wandered from his brother. They searched until breath failed. Eleanor knelt and touched one of the prints. He stepped toward the ridge. They followed the faint prints uphill. Snow swallowed the edges. Lantern light flickered against the slope. Halfway up, Eleanor saw a small depression. Something dark beneath the snow. She hurried forward, dropped to her knees, brushed snow aside. "A small mitten. He passed here," she said. They spread out. Volunteers called soft instructions, careful not to bury sound under panic. Eleanor moved ahead, following a thin ridge where the snow lay lighter. She reached a cluster of broken branches. She heard a faint sound, a weak cry. She rushed forward. A small boy huddled under a low branch, half buried, his face pale, his hands stiff. Eleanor lifted him into her arms. "You are safe now," she whispered. The priest ran toward them. Eleanor found him. They wrapped the boy in blankets. His brother cried when he saw him. "You saved him," the priest said. Eleanor shook her head. "He survived. We only reached him." They carried the boy back to the hall. Volunteers warmed him with cloths. His breath steadied. His hands softened as heat returned. When Eleanor walked home, dusk settled across the town. Lanterns glowed behind frosted windows. Snow glimmered under the falling light. She stepped into her cottage. Her daughter sat upright with a small smile. "You found him." "We did," Eleanor said. She sat near her daughter, holding her close. The girl leaned on her shoulder. "You bring warmth everywhere you go," the girl whispered. Eleanor looked at the quiet fire. Its glow spread across the room. "We all hold warmth," she said. "We share it until every home stands safe." Outside, night settled slow. Snow drifted gentle. The worst of the storm felt far. Inside, mother and daughter shared bread, broth, and quiet breath at the close of another winter day. Dawn pressed through thin frost on the window. Eleanor opened her eyes slowly. For the first time in many days, the cottage felt warm before she rose. The fire held its glow from the night's embers. She sat up. Her breath eased out in a soft cloud. The quiet felt gentle. Her daughter slept with steady breath. Her cheeks held color. No fever touched her. Eleanor brushed a strand of hair from her forehead and stood to place 2 small logs on the fire. Sparks rose in a slow curl. Outside, a faint hum drifted through the lane. Shovels scraped. Boots struck snow. People moved again, not with fear, but with purpose. The storm that held the town locked for days now weakened. The sky showed a hint of pale blue. Eleanor wrapped her shawl and opened the door. The cold touched her face with a soft sting. She stepped outside and breathed deep. "Morning, Eleanor," a neighbor called. She turned to see Mr. Copley pulling a small sled of chopped wood. "You wake early," she said. "Habit," he replied. "The snow slowed, so I check on the lanes." Eleanor nodded. "I start baking today. Bread helped my girl. Others need it too." He smiled. "If you need coal, tell me." She thanked him and stepped back inside. Her daughter stirred. "Mother, yes. Do we have light snow today?" "A small amount," Eleanor said. "The air feels mild." The girl sat up slow. "I want to sit near the window." Eleanor helped her up and placed a blanket around her shoulders. She carried a chair to the window. The girl sat with her legs tucked under the blanket and watched the lane through the glass. "People walk more," the girl said. "They feel safe again," Eleanor said. She lit a second small candle. Its flame joined the glow from the stove. The cottage felt brighter than the past mornings. Eleanor took flour from a small cloth sack and placed it on the table. She added a small pinch of salt and the last of the yeast the baker gave her 2 days before. She mixed the dough slow with her hands. Her daughter watched the motions. "You make it look peaceful," the girl said. Eleanor smiled. "Bread grows slow. It teaches patience." She kneaded the dough until it softened, then set it near the fire to rise. A soft knock sounded. Eleanor opened the door to see Margaret with a long scarf wrapped around her neck. "Eleanor, the traveller, grows stronger. He asks if you have time to speak with him." Eleanor considered her daughter. The girl nodded. "I rest here. Go." Eleanor stepped out and joined Margaret. They walked through the lane. Snow softened every sound. Eleanor saw fresh tracks where children walked toward the square. "The hall feels lighter today," Margaret said. "People smile again." "They earned that," Eleanor said. They reached the hall. Warmth from the stove seeped out into the entry. Inside, several families cooked small meals. Volunteers sorted blankets and folded clothes. The traveller sat near the far wall, drinking warm water. His posture looked stronger, his eyes brighter. Eleanor approached. He lowered his cup and nodded. Good morning," she said. "Your strength returns." "Yes," he replied. "My limbs no longer feel stiff. My breath stays smooth." She sat on a stool beside him. "You will walk far once the road's clear." "I know," he said. "Work waits for me. I fear I lost too much time." Eleanor shook her head. "Winter takes what it wants. You survived. Your path restarts on your feet, not your worry." He looked at her with gratitude. "You speak calm words. They help." Margaret approached and set a bowl of soup on the table for him. "Eat," she said. "Strength grows with warmth." Eleanor rose. "I check the square before I return home." The traveller lifted his eyes. "Eleanor, thank you again. I owe my life to your town." "Oh, nothing," she said. "Help others when your time comes." She stepped outside. The square stirred with slow life. Merchants who stayed idle during the storm now shaped paths in the snow. One man brushed frost from his cart. Another woman scraped ice from her shutters. Eleanor walked past the fountain buried in a white mound. A young man waved her over. "Eleanor," he said, Your hands helped the well yesterday. We must clear the roof of the herb store. The snow weighs heavy. She followed him to a small shop with a sagging roof. 2 women stood outside with brooms. Eleanor climbed the short ladder they held steady. She used a long flat board to push heavy snow from the roof. Clumps slid down the side and landed in soft piles. The roof rose a little as the weight eased. One woman exhaled. Thanks, Eleanor. You save more than you know. I do what must be done, Eleanor said, as she walked back toward her lane. She saw something new. Children ran through the square with red scarves streaming behind them. They carried small wooden toys. They laughed as they chased each other over the softened snow. Their joy echoed against the bakery walls. Eleanor paused to watch. It felt like the first sound of freedom after long days of silence. Margaret walked beside her. We waited for that sound, she said. Eleanor nodded. Winter loses grip. When Eleanor reached her cottage, her daughter sat with her chin in her hands, watching the children from the window. They look full of life, the girl whispered. You will join them soon, Eleanor said. The girl smiled. I hope I do. Eleanor checked the dough. It doubled in size. She shaped it into small rounds and placed them in the pan near the fire. The scent rose slowly. Her daughter breathed in with a soft sigh. It smells warm. Eleanor placed a cloth over the bread. It will be ready soon. A call echoed from outside. Eleanor, help needed at the granary. Eleanor opened the door. A man waved her forward. She looked at her daughter. I stay here, the girl said. I feel strong. Eleanor hurried through the lane. The granary sat on the west side of the square. 2 men struggled to open the main doors. Ice sealed the bottom edges. Eleanor joined them and pressed her shoulder into the wood. They pushed together until the ice cracked. The doors swung open with a stiff groan. Inside, bags of grains filled the room. Some had toppled. A 3rd man knelt beside a torn bag, gathering the spilled contents. We lost some, he said. Eleanor helped him scoop the grains into a small container. Save what you can. They worked until the spilled grains were cleared. The men thanked her. She stepped outside into the cold air and shook frost from her hands. When she returned home, her daughter held a small cup of warm water. I saved some for you, the girl said. Eleanor took the cup. Thank you. They ate warm bread together. The girl's appetite grew stronger. Afternoon drifted by with soft light. The sky cleared in long stretches. Blue broke through the clouds. Eleanor stepped outside and looked toward the horizon. A faint sun glowed. Children threw snow into the air and watched it fall. Women hung blankets near their doors to freshen them. Men cleared paths to the small bridge. The calm spread through the town. Near late afternoon, Margaret appeared at Eleanor's door again. Eleanor, she said, we prepare for a small gathering at the hall tonight. Not a feast, only a warm hour together. You should come. Bring your daughter. Eleanor looked at her girl. The girl's eyes lit with hope. Yes, Eleanor said. We join you, Margaret smiled. We wait for you near sunset. When evening touched the lane, Eleanor helped her daughter into a thicker shawl. The girl held her mother's hand as they stepped into the fading light. Snow sparkled under the lanterns. The hall glowed with warm firelight. Inside, families gathered around the stove. Children sat in clusters. The traveller rested on a bench, smiling at the soft noise. Eleanor and her daughter found seats near the back. Margaret greeted them and placed a small bowl of warm berries in the girl's hands. A woman lifted a small fiddle and played a quiet tune, not loud, not sharp, soft, slow, gentle enough to match the hum of the fire. The girl leaned into Eleanor's arm. "This feels peaceful," she whispered. "Yes," Eleanor said. "This is what winter gives when storms pass." The priest stepped forward. "We gather in thanks for the strength we shared." People nodded. Some bowed their heads. Some held hands. The traveler stood. "This town gave me life again," he said. "You opened your doors to a stranger. I hold gratitude for every face here." Eleanor met his eyes. His voice held steady conviction. The gathering continued with soft words and slow songs. Parents hushed sleepy children. Elders shared short memories of past winters. The fire glowed across every face. An hour passed, then another. When Eleanor prepared to leave, the traveler stepped toward her. "I leave when the road's clear," he said. "Your kindness follows me." Eleanor placed a wrapped piece of bread in his hand. "Take this for your travel." He lowered his head. "I honor this gift." Eleanor took her daughter's hand and walked home under a sky soft with moonlight. Snow fell in thin flakes. Inside the cottage, the girl settled under her blankets. Eleanor sat beside her. "Mother," the girl whispered, "I feel strong again." Eleanor brushed her cheek. "You healed through hard days. I am proud." The girl closed her eyes. "Tomorrow feels bright." "Yes," Eleanor said. "Tomorrow brings calm." Eleanor sat at the table for a moment longer. The silence felt peaceful. The fire glowed. Snow whispered lightly against the window. Winter still held the town, but the fear that ruled the past week fell away. The great snow softened at last. Morning arrived with a silver glow across the lane. Eleanor woke to a quiet stillness that felt new, almost gentle. The heavy pressure of the storm no longer held the town. Snow still lay deep, but the air softened. She rose from her bed and checked her daughter. The girl slept with easy breath. Eleanor stepped to the window. Thin flakes drifted from the pale sky. The town looked peaceful. No rushing. No shouts for help. No fear pressing at doors. She wrapped her shawl and warmed her hands over the fire. A soft knock reached the door. When she opened it, Margaret stood outside with flushed cheeks. "Eleanor," she said, "the roads open more today. The traveler walks soon. He asks if you wish to speak before he leaves." Eleanor nodded. "I do. I wait for you," Margaret said. Eleanor stepped inside and kissed her daughter's forehead. The girl stirred and smiled faintly. "I go to the hall for a short time," Eleanor said. "I will stay warm," the girl replied. Eleanor followed Margaret toward the hall. Snow crunched under their steps. A soft breeze carried the scent of wood smoke from many chimneys. Children built small forts near the square. Men repaired fences. Women carried baskets with herbs and cloth. Life returned with careful steps. Inside the hall, the traveler stood near the stove, fastening his coat. He looked stronger, taller, steady on his feet. His eyes lifted as Eleanor approached. "You seem ready," she said. He nodded. "The mill sits 2 days south. I walk on a clear road now." "You've survived the worst days," Eleanor said. "I survived because your town placed safety before rest," he replied. "I take that memory with me." Eleanor handed him a small cloth packet. "Dried fruit for your way." He accepted it with slow hands. "Your kindness saved my spirit." Eleanor met his gaze. "Walk steady, find work, build a warm life." The priest stepped forward. "I walk you to the edge of the lane." The traveler lowered his head. "Thank you." He turned to Eleanor again. If I reach good fortune, I return one day. Eleanor smiled. The door stands open. He left with the priest. Eleanor watched him step across the square, passing the well and the bakery. The townsfolk lifted hands in quiet farewell. He walked until his figure faded behind the heavy trees at the far road. Eleanor stepped outside and looked up at the sky. A soft light touched the clouds. Snowflakes drifted like slow ash. The air felt clean. She turned toward her lane and walked home. Her daughter sat by the window with a calm expression. "I saw you speak with him from here," she said. "He leaves with strength," Eleanor said. "I hope he finds comfort," the girl replied. Eleanor sat beside her. "He will. Many roads bend toward good hearts." The girl leaned her head against her mother's arm. "It feels peaceful, Mother. Our town moves again." Eleanor nodded. We reached the days after hardship. A knock sounded again. This one light and hurried. Eleanor opened the door. Two boys stood outside with a small sled. "Eleanor," one said, "the mayor sent us to ask if you help at the storeroom. Supplies need sorting. The storm mixed everything. They trust your hands." Eleanor nodded. "Tell him I walk there now." She turned to her daughter. "I stay not long. I wait here with warmth," the girl said. Eleanor walked with the boys to the storeroom near the old forge. A group of townsfolk stood outside. Bags of flour sat in one corner. Jars of preserves waited on shelves. Some crates tipped during the storm. The mayor approached. "Eleanor, good you are here. We lose track of some items. We sort them before we share." Eleanor rolled her sleeves. "Show me what needs order." Two women led her to a table filled with dried herbs, candles, and small jars. Eleanor separated each with slow care. Others followed her pace. Soon the room grew calm with steady work. A man entered with breathless steps. "The main bridge needs clearing," he said. The snow drifted again. Eleanor moved toward the door. "I help after this task." She finished the last jar, tied cloth around its lid, and passed it to the mayor. He smiled. "Your hands steady this town." Eleanor left the storeroom and walked toward the bridge. It stretched across a narrow creek. Snow had drifted into tall ridges along its edges. 3 men worked with shovels. Eleanor took one and carved a clean path. Snow fell away in slow cascades. One man paused. "Look past the ridge," he said. Eleanor turned. A cluster of deer stepped through the trees, their steps slow, their heads lifted toward the softened wind. The forest held a quiet presence. It feels like the storm ended for them too. One man whispered. Eleanor watched them for a long moment. Then she returned to work. When the bridge cleared, she walked home with slow steps. The lane felt familiar again. No fear. No sharp wind threatening the doors. Neighbors waved as she passed. Inside her cottage, her daughter sat at the table with the herbs she sorted days before. "I place them in small bags," she said. Eleanor smiled. "You help the town more than you know." The girl lifted a bundle wrapped with twine. "This one smells fresh." Eleanor bent to inhale it. "It brings warmth to the chest." They worked together through the next hour. Each bag held care. A soft knock at the door startled them. Eleanor opened it to find Mr. Copley again, holding a chipped bowl. "Soup," he said, "from my fire. You helped me. I give you this." Eleanor accepted it. "Thank you," he smiled. You and your girl bring strength to this lane. She watched him walk away with slow steps. Her daughter tasted the soup. It warms the body. Eleanor sat beside her and shared the bowl as they ate. A gentle call sounded across the square. The priest's voice carried through the cold. Eleanor, he called once. All is well today. The hall needs no urgent hands. Eleanor stepped outside. Good, let the town rest. He nodded. Peace returns after storms. She returned inside. Her daughter reached for her hand. Mother, she whispered, I want to walk outside. Only a short distance. I feel strong enough. Eleanor studied her. The girl's eyes held no fever. Her breath stayed smooth. Put on your boots, Eleanor said. The girl wrapped herself in a shawl and opened the door with slow excitement. Eleanor held her arm as they stepped into the lane. Snow crunched under the girl's feet. She smiled wide. They walked to the end of the lane. The girl touched the gate with her glove. This feels like the first day of the season, she said. It is the first day after fear, Eleanor replied. They stood for a moment, letting the cold brush their faces. Lanterns glowed across the square. The air felt safe. They returned home, warm and slow. Night approached. Eleanor prepared a small pot of stew. The scent filled the room. Her daughter set 2 bowls on the table. They ate in peace. No urgent knocks. No shouts from the square. No rush to help someone freezing in the wind. The fire glowed. The air warmed. When the girl finished her meal, she leaned back in her chair. Mother, does Christmas come soon? Eleanor nodded. Yes, it sits close. What do we do when it arrives? Eleanor brushed her daughter's cheek. We gather. We share warmth. We remember those who helped us through the storm. The girl smiled softly. Then it will be a bright night. Eleanor stood, walked to the window, and looked at the town. Soft lanterns lit the lanes. Snow fell in thin flakes. She felt gratitude for the calm, the safety, the slow quiet of the afterdays. She returned to her daughter's side and held her hand until her eyes closed in sleep. Tomorrow would bring something new. The morning of the final day arrived with a soft hush across the roofs. Eleanor opened her eyes before the first light touched the window. For a long moment, she listened. No wind pressed at the door. No sharp gust scraped the shutters. The cottage held a steady warmth. She rose and placed her feet on the floor. The fire still glowed from the night's embers. Her daughter shifted under her blankets. Mother, I am here, Eleanor said. The girl pushed herself upright. The air feels kind today. It does, Eleanor replied. The storm passed far from us now. Eleanor placed 2 small logs on the fire. The flames rose without struggle. The girl smiled as the room brightened. Outside, a faint sound floated across the lane. Not harsh, not urgent. A soft chime. Then another. Eleanor moved to the window. A few townsfolk placed wreaths on their doors. Thin ribbons of red hung from posts. The square filled with early stirrings. The girl joined her. Are they setting the square for Christmas? Yes, Eleanor said. The day nears. The girl wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Mother, may I help today? Even a small task. Eleanor studied her closely. Color filled her cheeks. Her breath stayed smooth. Her hands no longer trembled. You help if you walk slow, she said. The girl nodded with eager eyes. They dressed in layers. Eleanor tied her daughter's shawl under her chin. The girl opened the door and took her first step into the day. Snow lay thick but soft. The sunlight touched it in quiet patches. They walked toward the square with steady pace. Children ran past them with small pieces of ribbon. One girl waved. "We set lanterns tonight," she said before darting off. In the square, Margaret greeted them with open arms. "Eleanor, your girl looks strong today." "She found her strength again," Eleanor said. The girl smiled shyly. Margaret held out a small cloth bundle. "Fresh berries, saved for the holiday. Share them later." Eleanor thanked her. Nearby, men built a small wooden frame beside the hall. Women placed candles in tall glass holders. Children gathered pine branches to shape wreaths for the posts. Eleanor stepped forward to help tie cloth strips along the frame. Her daughter assisted by passing ribbon to her. Their motions flowed easy. The girl laughed once when a ribbon slipped from her mitten. Eleanor felt a wave of quiet joy settle through her. Across the square, Mr. Copley carried a tray of sweets toward a table. "Eleanor," he called, "your hands are needed at the bread stall. The baker asks for help." Eleanor turned to her daughter. "Do you feel strong enough to sit near Margaret for a short time?" The girl nodded. "I sort the ribbons. Margaret showed me how." Eleanor touched her cheek. "I walk only across the square. I return soon." The baker stood beside a cart filled with small loaves. He wiped his brow. "Busy morning," he said. "People want bread for Christmas, and my hands feel slow after the hard week." Eleanor lifted a cloth covering a second tray. The loaves sat warm. "I help arrange these." Together they placed loaves in neat rows. Villagers approached with small coins, and the baker greeted each in turn. A young woman stepped forward. Her face held a peaceful glow. "My mother told me you helped our family during the worst night," she said to Eleanor. "Please take this." She handed her a jar of dried herbs. Eleanor accepted it. "Your family holds strong." "You helped with that," the woman replied before turning away as Eleanor returned to her daughter. She paused at the center of the square. The sounds around her felt warm. Laughter, soft conversation, the scrape of shovels, the hum of small steps across snow. The girl lifted her head as her mother approached. "Mother, I helped untangle the ribbons," she said, proud. Eleanor smiled. "You bring order wherever you sit." Margaret placed a hand on the girl's shoulder. "Your child's strength returns faster than anyone expected." Eleanor lowered her eyes. She fought hard. By midday, the square filled with life. People walked between the stalls. Children shared small sweets. Men carried bundles of wood. Women prepared warm drinks in large metal pots. The priest approached Eleanor and her daughter. "Tonight we light lanterns across the lane. We place one at every door. When the sun sets, the whole town glows." The girl's eyes widened. "I want to see that." "You will," the priest said. "Your mother helped us survive the storm. You bring us light by being here." The girl looked away, shy from the praise. Eleanor thanked the priest and helped her daughter stand. They walked slowly toward the bridge. Snow lay thin along the edges. The creek beneath whispered with soft movement. "This place feels safe now," the girl said. "It does," Eleanor replied. They walked to the far end of the lane and back. Villagers waved to them. Some offered small smiles. Others raised their hands in greeting. Eleanor felt something shift within her. Fear no longer pressed her ribs. Her shoulders no longer held tight from the past days. She felt a deep sense of peace settle slow. When they returned to the square, they found a new group gathered near the well. The mayor stood atop a small crate. "Townsfolk," he said, "we faced the great snow together. Some days felt endless. Some nights felt harder than any we remember. But our town held. Each of you gave something. Your strength carried every home." People murmured softly. Some nodded. Double quotes, "Tonight we honor the quiet work of those who helped," the mayor continued. "We light the lanterns for them." Margaret stepped forward. "I want to thank Eleanor." Eleanor froze. The mayor nodded. Yes, she walked through storms with no thought of herself. She helped the sick. She saved the well. She cleared roofs. She lifted those who fell. People turned to her. Soft smiles. Warm eyes. Eleanor shook her head. "We survived because we stood together." The mayor replied, "Yes, but your hands held the center of many tasks." Eleanor bowed her head. "I did only what was needed." Her daughter took her hand. "Mother, you helped everyone." Eleanor felt tears touch her lashes. Though she kept her breath steady, the mayor stepped down. Tonight, Eleanor lights the first lantern. A soft cheer followed. Eleanor's heart trembled, but she held herself still. Afternoon passed with gentle rhythm. She returned home with her daughter to prepare a small meal. They cooked a simple broth and shared quiet conversation. "Mother," the girl said as she stirred the pot, "this winter changed me." Eleanor knelt beside her. "Tell me." "I learned how small kindness grows strong. You helped so many. I want to be like that." Eleanor touched her daughter's cheek. "You already are." As the sun lowered, the town stirred again. Lanterns hung from hooks along every lane. Thin glass holders lined the square. Children held candles ready to share the first flame. Eleanor wrapped her daughter in her thickest shawl and stepped outside with her. Snow glittered under the faint light. They walked toward the square. Every villager gathered there. The mayor approached Eleanor with a small lantern trimmed in brass. "Light this," he said softly. The priest held a match. He touched flame to the wick. The lantern glowed with warm gold. Eleanor lifted it high. A ripple of light spread as children touched their candles to hers. Lantern after lantern lit the lane. A wave of warmth filled the town. Her daughter leaned close. "Mother, it looks like hope." Eleanor lowered the lantern so the girl could see its glow fully. "This belongs to all of us." Families placed lit lanterns outside every home. The entire town shone in quiet harmony. Snow reflected the glow until the whole world seemed wrapped in gentle light. The traveler's absence felt peaceful now. His path lay bright ahead of him. The town's future felt steady. The worst storm of their lives remained behind them. Eleanor's daughter held her mother's hand with firm strength. "I feel new today." Eleanor's voice softened. "You rise into yourself again." They walked home under the lanterns. Their shadows followed them in long shapes across the snow. Inside the cottage, Eleanor lit a candle near the window. Her daughter stood beside her. Outside, lanterns flickered across the entire town. Inside, the fire glowed warm. The scent of baked bread lingered. Eleanor placed her hands around her daughter's. "We faced fear. We held strong. Now we rest." The girl leaned into her. "Thank you for every day, Mother." Eleanor kissed her forehead. "You give me strength." They sat near the fire as the evening deepened. The light of the lantern outside flickered on the frost-covered window. In that soft glow, the winter no longer felt sharp. It felt peaceful, safe. Shared. Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment and breathed slow. Her daughter's soft breath joined hers. Outside, the lanterns stayed bright until the late hours. The hardest days had passed. A healing season began. Thank you for sitting with me through this quiet winter. These nights grow calmer when we share stories like this. Before you sleep, breathe deep. Feel the warmth around you. Rest your hands, your shoulders, your thoughts. Next time, we follow another old night from long ago. I prepared a small gift for you, a simple winter bookmark you use for warm reading hours. You will find it waiting in our next story. Settle in now. Let the glow fade slow. Let your eyes fall quiet. Good night.